Well, it's 9 o'clock, so good morning. Welcome, everyone. I can see Gary and Jackie, Sandy, so we've got a Synthetica component here. Welcome. It's really good to welcome you all here. This is the first of the webinars that we're going to be running. We're running 4 this week on 2 topics, one on remote working and one on leading through crisis. And I'm joined today by Catherine Bond and William Winstone, my colleagues at Metsana Partners, and together we'll be leading different parts of the webinar today. Catherine and I will be focusing on the content, and William is going to be monitoring the chat box. So if you've got any questions as we go through today, please write questions or comments in the chat. William will be monitoring those, and we'll have time at the end of the presentation to take a look at the questions and discuss those fully. We'd like you to stay on mute, please, for the first part of the conversation. And we're also going to record this. I hope that's okay, but also means we can make it available to people who aren't here. And so again, welcome. It's good to see some familiar faces and some unknown faces because you're dialing in, but it's really good to have you here today. And I guess the setting for this, as we all know, is that right now we're living in quite extraordinary times. At least they're extraordinary for us. It does occur to me that over the centuries that people have been on the planet, people have often encountered times like this. And in recent years, if you've been living in Syria or sub-Saharan Africa, you might have said life wasn't so good for the last 10 years anyway. But I think what's different here is that we're all facing this. It's a pandemic and it's an issue that we're all facing together. And I guess our view is that the role of leaders, and that's us, has never been more critical. And we've all got an important job here to ensure that businesses, people and the planet all survive and prosper. And our belief is that if we each do what we can within our sphere of influence, then as human beings, then we're going to learn and we'll adapt, and eventually we'll all thrive again. We don't know when that will be, but that will certainly happen. So in terms of the flow of today, the first thing we wanted to look at was really just to give some understanding of what's going on for us as human beings right now in the context that we're in. If you look at the headlines today, they're pretty dramatic. I remember listening to the news last night, and the link said this will be the, you remember this broadcast forever. This is a life-defining broadcast. And we know that right now a lot of people are not feeling safe. For a lot of people, they're feeling unsafe because their basic health is threatened, their security is threatened, their financial well-being is threatened, they're worried about their family. So we know that if people don't feel safe, they can't attend to lots of other things. This was Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and he talked about, we need basic physiological needs like food and water, then we need to feel safe, and then we need to connect and so on. And right now, at a pretty basic level, a lot of people are feeling threatened. And that's normal. So I think it's helpful just to normalise that and say that's okay, and it's understandable given the situation we're in. If we take a closer look at what's going on at the moment, we also know, and this is, we're speaking to you as performance psychologists here, that there are other things that are also important to people. And when it comes to remote working, some of these things will also be impacted. And we know things like status is important to people. People need to feel important. We need to feel a degree of certainty and control over what's going on. We need to have some autonomy. We need to feel connected, and we need to feel that things are fair. And clearly in the situation we're in at the moment, a lot of these things are going to be threatened. And we know also that when people feel threatened, there's 2 typical responses. That's fight or flight. And I think, so when we're coming to deal with people working remotely, it's really important, again, to be aware of this and to understand what these different needs are, how they're compromised by remote working, and what we can all do to manage these needs a little bit better. How that's showing up at the moment, well, I think panic buying is a good example of fight. Get out of my way, I'm going to get what I need to survive. That's the fight. And then flight, I think, is showing up as denial. People saying it's going to be okay. People refusing to admit it's a problem, people turning a blind eye, putting their head in the sand. That's a version of a flight response as well, neither of which are particularly helpful. So when it comes to working remotely, which we're all doing now. And it's very interesting because when we started to plan this a couple of days ago, it seemed like working remotely was an option, but now it's obviously the reality for pretty much everyone. But when it comes to working remotely, we know that this is more uncertain. We're living in uncertain times. It's new for people, so that's going to raise people's levels of threat and anxiety. Working remotely may challenge our sense of status. No one's got the corner office anymore. We're all in the same boat. For some people, they'll be uncomfortable. It will reduce the direct level of contact we have. So that threat for relatedness, of being close to people, is compromised at the moment. And for some people, this will feel unfair. We've heard of people feeling angry at the government, angry at the world, angry at the virus. Whether or not it's unfair, it can feel unfair. So in many ways here, we're in a high threat situation and people are going to start to respond differently. Strangely enough, though, working at home may allow for some more autonomy. So this is something we want to focus on here. What can we control? Are there ways here where people don't have to commute or have got more control over the time? We might actually have more autonomy than we had in the past. Some other challenges to working remotely, which I guess we're all starting to encounter. As we said, the overall level of anxiety is high, and that's made worse now by the lockdown. Obviously came into effect last night. There's less feedback, less monitoring, less supervision. It's harder to get and give support to one another when we're working remotely. There are different distractions from normal. The office distractions are gone, but I now know many people, if you're not used to working from home, if you've got school-aged children, there's a lot of new distractions going on, as well as just the whole social media virus threat. I know it's very easy to, I'm probably looking at the news more than I normally do. So there's a high level of distraction going on. And then this whole challenge of working from home with school closures. As you said, this is, again, new as of last Friday, I think. That's come on stream big time. But for many people, they're going to be grappling with looking after their family as well as their work commitments. The other main challenge we see from working at home is actually overwork. If you're commuting to work, then you've got a much clearer boundary about when work starts and stops. If you're working from home, it's much harder sometimes to know when to switch off, because for most of us, the amount of work we have to do is unlimited. If we stayed at our desk for if we could stay awake for 24 hours, we could work for 24 hours and there'd still be work to do. So working from home, it's particularly important to think about how we manage those boundaries and transitions from when am I on, when am I off? And that's not going to be handled in the same way as normal. So there's some of the challenges we face, both practically and psychologically, in terms of the current situation and needing to work from home. I'm going to hand over to Catherine now, who's going to talk us through what are some of the options, what are some of the things we can do, either individually or as leaders, to help cope with the situation.
Thanks, Jonathan. So first of all, just thinking about kind of what everybody can do. So thinking about yourself, maybe now being a bit selfish. If you're a leader, think about yourself and your own work from home. So a few kind of common sense guidelines, and I think everybody's kind of getting into the rhythm of trying to apply them. I know certainly people in their second week working from home are trying to really kind of move into applying these away from kind of the novelty of working from home and the kind of holiday-like mindset to getting a really regular routine. But a really good rule of thumb is really try and replicate the environment, the structure that you have at work and the interaction you have as far as you possibly can. And clearly it's hard to totally replicate, but there's quite a lot that you can do. So basic stuff is trying to get a designated regular workplace, so somewhere that you're going to work every day, away from the living area, ideally away from the kitchen. I'm in my kitchen at the moment, and I try not to work here too much because it's too near to the fridge and other temptations and distractions, too near to the washing machine, just put washing on and get chores done. So ideally kind of away from the living area. Some people, I guess, don't have an office or a dining room, but even if you can create a bit of a space in a corner of a bedroom or a spare bedroom, that's ideal. And again, kind of avoiding the temptation of working with the laptop perched on your knees on the sofa, having a kind of a desk, table and chair set up. and just attending to, you know, really basic things like making sure you've got natural light if possible, there's enough ventilation, the heat's right, etc. So that very kind of basic stuff is important to get right. The second thing, and this is really critical, is getting a structure and routine. Jonathan mentioned the idea of transitions and having different parts to the day. That's super important. It's even more important after the announcement last night, where our ability to leave the house is now really restricted. If we have further restrictions, you know, obviously that will become even more important. So the idea of having different parts of the day, tempting though it may be to stay in your pajamas. I won't ask how many people are in their pajamas right now, but tempting though it is, creating a very definite start to the day. So in the same way that, you know, if you go to the office, you get up, you have a shower, you get dressed, you have breakfast or not, you then commute to work. There's usually a good hour, 2 hour gap between getting out of bed and starting work. So in the same way, try and create a little routine in the morning. You may get up, I'm doing some stretching and some core stability work, and then having breakfast and then starting work at the moment. So that's my little routine. So avoiding getting out of bed and rolling straight to your laptop. The first hour really sets the tone for the day. It really, you know, even that simple act of getting up, getting dressed, getting out of the pajamas really helps with both your mindset and the kind of practical, right, it's time to start work, and create a kind of clear boundary. Secondly, set goals and a timetable. So be really clear about what your deliverables are, what you want to achieve that day, and a rhythm for the day of how you're going to do that. And if you're sharing your workspace with others, either a partner, flatmates, or indeed kids, this is really important too, and I'll come on to that in a minute. A great idea is just to share that with, you know, your line manager, and also connect with the rest of your team and say, this is what I'm working on today, this is when I'll be on, this is when I'll be off. That is absolutely important if you're juggling childcare and potentially working evenings, or certainly not a 9 to 5 kind of routine as you might normally be. Within that plan, really think, and we'd encourage you to build in a plan to connect with people. So connectedness, or, you know, Jonathan said, relatedness, is really important. It is going to be absolutely key here, both kind of connecting with people at work and connecting with people socially, in a virtual way, clearly now. But be very kind of deliberate, conscious, and create a plan for who you're going to connect with, when you're going to connect, and how you're going to connect. I'll come on to that in a moment. A nice idea might be to build in kind of cycles of work. So in every hour, for example, have 50 minutes you're working, and 10-minute break where you're making a cup of tea, hanging out the washing, or whatever it is. But that's a nice way of kind of allowing yourself to have a bit of a break and attending to stuff around the house, if that's a distraction or a temptation for you. Move this on. Another thing, and actually the other thing I'd suggest as well is make sure you have a lunch break within that. So building something in the middle of the day. And then at the end of the day, again, to help with the notion of transitioning away from the desk and into your evening, into family time or leisure time, or whatever it is, physically kind of closing your laptop, even packing it away in a bag and packing all your work stuff away. So you're regaining your living space. So your living space is not an office space. You're taking back control, and it's a living space. And as I mentioned before, that kind of notion of transitions and boundaries are really, really critical, and I think even more critical now. Glitchy. If you have, it's not just kids, but if you are sharing your living and your working space now with others, there's an added complication here. And I think, you know, the rule of thumb here again is to get quickly into a shared structure and routine. So, if you've got kids, I know kids have, certainly secondary school kids, even primary kids have got lessons, they've got a structure, they've got tasks to do, but on a daily basis, creating a shared plan for when you're all working and schooling, and when you're not. So, as an example, that early part of the day, kind of sitting and having breakfast together, maybe even doing some exercise together. I talked to somebody yesterday who'd just done a yoga session with her kids, and then was sitting down, and it was 9 o'clock start time for school and work, and then had planned to have a family lunch, and again then work through till 3:30, and then they were all going to go for a walk. So instilling structure early on, I think, is really important. That third point there about a duty rota is important, particularly if you, within the family, there is somebody that is a normal, does most of the stuff around the house because maybe they work part-time or commute less, or whatever it is, and the other partner does less. Now that you're working from home, you may need to renegotiate that. Otherwise there's potential for resentments to occur. So create a duty rota, involve every member of the household as far as possible. And again, that idea of kind of very segmented parts of the day with clear transitions between work time, family time, meal time, leisure time. Clearly, you may need to think flexibly about your work times if you need to look after kids or relatives during the day. Then making the most of your evenings or even weekends. So be innovative, be creative. This is a different world, a different way of doing things. Things like agreeing shift with your partner. I've heard of already examples of online kind of play dates and activities for kids to do with other families, and having one parent kind of supervise or create activities that they're all doing virtually. So I think, as we move through this week and into next week, there'll be increasing kind of publicity and sharing about different activities coming and being made available to keep kids occupied. Another kind of key point, also think about virtual activities for you. Great example, spoke to somebody yesterday who was in a book club, and they're having a Zoom book club call next week. So thinking about your own routine and what you'd normally do in the evenings, now that we can't physically connect with people, thinking about how can we do those virtually as far as possible. And the last point is just review how this is working. So, you as a family or, as a partnership, actually sit down, how is this working? Build in time to actually kind of it sounds a bit business-like, but I would really encourage you to do that and have some really open conversations. This may last not weeks, but months. So getting into a good way of operating together, a good pattern which feels right and fair and equal for everybody is key. And then kind of lastly on this, thinking about your own remote working practices, self-care. Now, at the moment, we have one opportunity to take some exercise every day. We'd really encourage you that you think about how you're going to do that and maximize that. If you're used to doing, maybe having a walk and then some other exercise a day, then kind of clearly you're going to have to restrict that. But making sure you do build in time every day to leave the house. It's possible we may not have that opportunity in a few weeks' time. So again, we'd really encourage you to do that. Obviously sticking within the new guidelines that have been announced last night. Keep hydrated, so really key. Kind of keep drinking water. Have a food plan. That's not a bad idea. Building that kind of food plan into the daily plan for working the kitchen, and really thinking about dialing up that kind of sense of connectedness and how you're connecting with others during the day. Use a whole range of different media. Obviously there's kind of chat rooms and texting, WhatsApp groups, and creating kind of team team channels like that, calls, we'd also really encourage video calls. So actually physically seeing people is the next best thing to being with them. So if you haven't got a video conferencing capacity, then we'd really encourage you to look into that, absolutely maximise it. And be kind to yourself. This is a really extraordinary time, and quite suddenly, our conditions have changed. It will take a bit of time to adapt to that. Be forgiving of yourself. If it's clearly anxious, it's an anxious time. There will be potentially constraints on your productivity and getting as much done as possible. So kind of rule of thumb is just be forgiving, be kind to yourself. One last point with that as well is, I think it's really been key in the last week, is just being careful how much news you consume. Things have been moving very fast. It's saturating the news channels, social media. There's more and more stuff going around in social media. I've seen a number of different videos coming from doctors and NHS in the last few days, which were quite distressing. So you're in control of how much you consume, and even how much you talk about this at home and with other people. So if you're feeling that you're feeling quite anxious and uncertain about the situation, just control that, just limit that consumption, make some rules for yourself and for the household around how much you're consuming the news. So I'll move on now. I know many of you are leading teams, so just shifting focus here to thinking about how do we best lead remote teams. And we've got a bit of a framework which is easy to remember, called the 5 C's. So a good rule of thumb here is, your job here is to try and create as much clarity and certainty for people, give them as much kind of control and autonomy in, for example, how they structure their day and how they go about their work. Be as flexible as you can be, engender confidence, fuel that sense of connectedness with others and within the team, and ensure people are feeling okay, feeling there's a right balance of challenge, that they're setting up to thrive in the workplace, in their remote workspace. So a few top tips here is just help people be clear on their goals and expectations. So that notion of wanting everybody to set a kind of a clear plan for the day and deliverables. So think as a leader, particularly in the first few weeks, really helpful practical thing you can do is to just support them with that. Have check-ins with them around that at the start of the day. Be ready to check in more regularly than you normally do. And that may be, that might be an additional demand to you. You may have to be creative around that. You may have to think about, whether you can get your kind of normal workload done in the same way. But I would be ready to dial up how much you're connecting and communicating with people and supporting people, particularly in the first couple of weeks. Balance the kind of conversations that you're having around tasks, so the focus on work, and the checking in. How are you finding things? How are you doing? Different people respond differently. Some people will make a relatively smooth adaptation. Others this will be a challenge for, and their anxiety levels may be higher at various points over the next couple of weeks as some of those those triggers are pulled that Jonathan talked about. So have a good balance between those two. Give reassurance, give feedback. One of the interesting things about remote workers is they typically get less feedback. They get less feedback in the moment. They get less affirmation of that they're doing a good job, or even when they've completed a task well. So give as much kind of feedback as you can. And then some really practical thoughts around, if you're leading a team, thinking about having team huddles. So a great idea in the first couple of weeks is just having daily huddles in the morning, maybe even one towards the end of the day as well. So a huddle in the morning where everybody might share their plan for the day, their deliverables for the day, what support they need, when they're going to be working. So there's clear understanding in the team about that. And then an end of the day or towards the end of the day, kind of check in. How are we all doing? How did you find it? Where are you up to? Is there anything that you need support with before the end of the day or before the end of your working day? And obviously that individual connection as well. It puts quite a lot of responsibility on you as a team leader to do that. So think about encouraging people to buddy up within the team. So have buddies that check in on each other, that call each other a few times a day. So 2s or 3s. Ask the more senior amongst your team, or those that seem to be managing the transition, coping well, ask them to step up. Ask them to kind of reach out to people that may be finding the transition more difficult. And as I mentioned before, video calls are king. So as many video calls as you can. That will really help kind of dial up that sense of connectedness and reduce the perception of isolation. And then lastly, over the next few weeks, businesses are having to adapt and change. The work people are doing is needing to change as things are slowed down, or maybe clients are lost, or whatever. So fully expect that the nature of the work that you and the team do may need to change. And if you are a leader, spend time really clarifying what the essentials are. So what our priorities are, even on a day-to-day basis, and making sure that everybody's clear and focused on those. So Jonathan, I'll pass you over to you for the final few slides.
Thanks, Catherine. So this infographic really pulls together everything we've just been talking about. And I guess it's worth acknowledging that for many of you and for many folks, remote working isn't new. We know how to do this. We've got this. We know how to work at home. There's a lot of people have been doing it for a long time. What's different is the context and that level of heightened threat, heightened anxiety that we're all experiencing because of the situation we're going through. So I'll let you take a minute to look at this infographic. It covers everything we've talked about. Some very simple do's and don'ts around having a designated workspace, setting clear structure and goals for the day, communicating clearly with your team and with your family about what you're doing, when you're available, when you're not, ramping up the connection, really stay in touch more than you normally would. Create a family plan, be clear with your family and help them find some structure and clarity for the day as well. If you've got children at home, let them know when it's family time, when it's not. Look after yourself, what you put in your body, keep yourself well fed and watered, eat good food, get some exercise. And then the don'ts, don't stay in your pajamas all day. Start as you mean to go on. Make a good start to the day, get yourself going, set the tone for how you want to work. Don't work somewhere that's busy and full of distractions. Might be hard if you're in a small flat, but do your best. Don't stay inside. Make the best of your garden if you've got one, or your one opportunity to go out. Don't focus on the negatives, which is a double negative in itself. Focus on what you can do. Let's all be creative here. Let's all be innovative. Humans are good at that. And don't stay silent. This is an extraordinary time. It's normal for any of us to feel worried or anxious or upset. That is normal. That's not being weak. That's just being normal. So please acknowledge that, reach out, talk to one another, support one another. That's if we do that, we're going to get through this. So we've got time now for any questions, any comments, any feedback that anyone's got. I'm not sure there's been much in the group chat yet, but we've got 10 or 15 minutes to open that up to hear any questions from all of you folks who've joined us today. you'll need to unmute. If you want to say something, you'll need to unmute yourself. And if you're new to Zoom, the controls are normally in the bottom left of your screen to unmute. William, is there anything you would add from what you've been watching the chat, or any messages to you? Anything you would add to summarise or expand on?
I think a big part of this is about reminding ourselves to do some of the things that we know already, but in a state of really heightened anxiety can get left behind. And a couple of the points really jumped out for me, and that was about prioritization, what really matters, the essentials, and really tuning into your teams and the individuals within your teams. And if you've got very big teams, making sure you actually have a structure that each individual is attended to and has two-way conversation. So there's some of the things which jump out for me from this. Because I think once you have that level of conversation and relationship established, that is calming, and that can allow you to attend to some of the individual challenges and differences that each team member might be bringing.
Thank you, William. And any other questions or comments from anyone else?
Hi, Jonathan. It's Darren Fergus, Synthetica Limited.
Hi, Darren. Good to have you on board.
Thanks so much, and thank you for a great session. In terms of how we're all feeling, how do we take breaks and, I guess, stop the feelings of anxiety overwhelming us, in your opinion, please, Jonathan?
Yeah, I was thinking, I went out for a run this morning and I was thinking about this. A really good thing to do is to just pay attention, and I invite us each to just reflect on this right now. If you look around the room that you're sitting in now, is there anything that you can see right now that is of a danger to you? Is there any threat right now that you can see or hear or is within touching distance of you in your room right now? Is there a yes from anyone? Well, and if there is, do something about it.
Your mind.
Okay. Okay.
Yourself.
Your mind, yourself.
The danger.
Okay. But there's nothing actually right now, if we look around what we can touch and feel, there's nothing right now that is a direct threat to us. If there is, we need to do something about it. If there's not, then to acknowledge that the threat, as Lucas said, is being created in my mind. I'm creating that threat by worrying about something that is not real for me right now in this present moment. And I think that principle of remaining mindful, remaining present to what is it right now I need to attend to? What is it in this absolute moment, in this physical place that I'm in right now? What am I experiencing right now, and what do I need to do about it? And I think when we do that, we notice that the things that we're anxious about are things that aren't happening, to us in this moment. They're future threats, they're distant threats. We might need to take, it's not about ignoring them, but it's about being rational about them. And then I think the other two things to do that can really help is to notice right now, and again, I'll invite everyone to do this, right now, can you list to yourself 3 things that you're grateful for in your life? Three things, 3 people, 3 anythings right now in your life that you feel grateful for. And my final tip, Darren, is to ask yourself, what's one thing that you can do today that's going to help another human being? One practical thing that you can do today that's going to help one other person on this planet. And commit to including that in your plan.
I think that's a really, really lovely point for us all. and something to reflect on at the end of today in terms of what we've done.
So there's my 5-minute guide to resilience, which will be a subject of a separate conversation another time. What's happening right now? Do I face any real threats in this very moment, or are they in my mind? What are some things I feel grateful for in my life right now? And what's one way I can extend help to someone else right now? So if any other questions, otherwise, if you'd like to get a copy of the materials we've used today, we're happy to share them. All we'd do is ask you to add your email address to the chat box, and we'll add your name to our mailing list so you can get future updates as well, and we'll send you the materials we've used. And if you'd like to follow up more, then again, please put your details in the chat. If you'd like a call, we're very happy to schedule a call in the next few days to speak more about this and to talk about what else we can do to help. So that has brought us to the end of our webinar today. Thank you so much for joining in. I really hope this has been useful for you. It's, as we said right at the start, we're living in unprecedented times in some ways, because perhaps the first time every single person on this planet is facing the same challenge. But again, what we're facing is not at all unprecedented, because human beings for millennia have dealt with really tough times. And as humans, we've been through this sort of thing before, and we'll be through this, we'll survive it, and we'll be through this sort of thing again. So whilst it's unprecedented in some ways, in other ways, as human beings, we've got this. And thank you so much. We'll leave the Zoom room open for a little while if you want to put comments or questions into the chat box. Otherwise, make the best of today. It's the day we've got before each of us. So thank you so much, and go well, folks. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.
And then the